All right, hello to those just joining us. Thanks for hopping on tonight's JUMPinar. Just give us a few minutes to get settled here and let others join in, and we'll get started very shortly. All right, hello again to everyone who's just joining in. Just give us another couple minutes here before we get started, and we'll talk to you in a minute. All right, Ryan, how we doing? We good to get started here?
If you give me 30 seconds, the answer to that is yes.
Cool. Well, I gotta start things up and let.
No, you can do your thing. Go right ahead. Be my guest, please.
Perfect. Yeah, you should have plenty of time by the time I wrap that up. All right, welcome everybody to tonight's JUMPinar. This is our weekly webinar series that we host every Monday night at 7 p.m. You can check out all the events we have coming up and everything on our website at jumpstartgermantown.com. But tonight's session is going to be probably our last or second to last one, focusing on commercial real estate development, or edging away from the residential side of things. If you've been joining us for the past several weeks, probably a month or two now, we've been covering commercial real estate as opposed to residential real estate topics, coinciding with our Jumpstart 2.0 program, which our guest tonight, Ryan, also spoke at a couple weeks ago. So that's people who have graduated the standard Jumpstart training and are ready to take on some bigger and more complex projects that are zoned commercially and used in a commercial way. That's what we're covering here, and I think one of the first stepping stones to the world of commercial real estate development has to be mixed use development, which is units that have both a residential aspect and a commercial aspect. And our guest tonight, Ryan, has completed several of those projects and has a lot of experience that he's willing to share with you. So we're going to jump into that conversation in just a second. Just a reminder of the timeline for tonight. We're going to be having a conversation, just Ryan and I. He's going to be working through a presentation for about 30 to 45 minutes. And then after that, we'll have a live Q&A session where everybody in the call here can type their questions into the Q&A, and we'll go through them at the end, and I'll ask them to Ryan on your behalf. And any other information you want to send me or questions, you can do so using the Q&A, as we'll have the chat disabled. But yeah, I think that's all the ground rules I got to cover up front. And I'll just hand it over to Ryan here to introduce himself and get the session started. How's it going, Ryan?
Everything is good. All is well.
Great. Well, I'm doing great, and we got 41 attendees here tonight, so it's a good round for a Monday at 7 p.m. I appreciate
Nice. Love it.
And yeah, cool.
All right. So do I have screen share ability?
You should. Go ahead.
All right. So as Derek had said, we are going to talk a little bit about mixed use development today. I'll give you an idea of the kind of stuff that we've done. All questions are open, so feel free to ask whatever you'd like. I am happy to be an open book here. I'm going to share my screen, tell you a little bit about us, some of the projects we've worked on, and then feel free to ask as you go. Let us get started here. All right. We need to switch screens. Let's try that one more time, shall we? There we go.
Looking
That
good.
works out well. All right. So this is all my contact information. So feel free to take a look at it, write it down, use it. If you are a mentee of mine already, you will know that most of the time I am quite accessible. So my name is Ryan Spack. The company that we have is called Spack Group. Spack Group is made up of a multitude of companies. We have an investment company and development company. We have a construction company called Caps Construction, and then we have a management company called Spack Management. Everything that we do is completely and totally integrated into itself, but it started with this little tiny 450 square foot, 2-bedroom house in North Philadelphia. And the story that I like to tell about this, which I don't really get into too very much with the Jumpstart classes, is that I completely botched this property. When I was 18 years old, my parents helped me buy it. They co-signed. I put the deposit down after working throughout high school. It was my first investment venture. And by the time I was 23, I was in pre-foreclosure. The tenant stopped paying me. My employer was not paying me very well. And I was too proud to go ask mommy and daddy for help. And so I had to figure out how to get myself out of that. But what it did was it completely tanked my credit. My score was in the 400s. I missed the entire boom leading up to the 2008 crash. I spent almost 8 years of my life trying to just get myself back together. And while I was doing that, I started a janitorial company. And so my special skill set in life is refinishing and waxing floors. And so what I do now is very different than where I came from in terms of my career. And so I'm very, very proud to be able to be a part of Jumpstart for the last 6 years and help others transition their life from whatever career they have to a career that they want in real estate. It's been a real pleasure. So what does Spack Group do? We would put ourselves in the category of social impact real estate development. Every development that we put into the ground has a very intentional mission. Our goal is to ensure that we are inclusive, that we are equitable in some way, and you'll see that in the projects that we undertake. And so what exactly does that mean? It means that we are engaged with the community. It means that we recognize the difference between gentrification and a gentrifier. No one wants blight in their neighborhood. The question ends up being who owns it and how they manage it. How do they interact with the folks that are in that community? We do a lot of listening. If you follow the message boards in West Philadelphia, you'll see me very, very involved, which is a very, very different take, asking a lot of questions of the community, very different take than most real estate developers. I highly recommend that you take that on as part of the message and management of your company. Put your time in. This is volunteer. My volunteering related to this goes well beyond Jumpstart. My mentee meetups, which happen once a month, have anywhere between 25 and 30 people in them. And I would say only half of them are made up of Jumpstarters. And then do something with your project that makes a financial effort into the community. And you'll see some of our projects and how we've gone about doing that. So our tagline is equitably focused and community driven. That is our goal in our projects, not to just build for the sake of building, but to make sure that those projects have an equitable component to them, as well as build what the community is looking for. So our company is fully integrated. Our concept is to rehabilitate, reposition, and revitalize highly distressed, underutilized properties. Our goal is to make walkable commercial corridors, which is one of the things we're going to be talking about differently today. Building stabilized properties, so taking properties that were not stabilized and making them so. Creating homes for our neighbors, not just tenants. You'll never hear one of my employees or a team member on our staff call them tenants. They are residents to us. These are their homes. And provide outstanding customer service. And so if you go on Facebook, you go on Yelp, you'll see it's 4.5 stars, 5 stars. We've been in business for 11 years. We've had the opportunity to piss off a lot of people. And so the fact that we still have 5 stars on Facebook is pretty spectacular for us. We're very, very, very proud of that. Real estate gives us a lot of wonderful opportunities. I get to speak here tonight. I get the opportunity to go to amazing events. I get to meet amazing people and learn, who have taught me a whole lot more than I knew prior to being in this business. But it's given us some really great opportunities, like being a part of Jumpstart, or helping to save the Coltrane House, or being involved with the Concrete Cowboy movie. So if you haven't seen it on Netflix, I highly recommend it.
It's a church. You're making no plans, so watch your house. There's a horse in the house.
So you'd say, why does that have to do with real estate? Well, the production company needed someone in the real estate business who understood the nuances of city government, understood the nuances of construction, and needed to be able to hustle to find locations for them when their location scouts failed to find what they needed. So SPAC Group not only found the house where this scene was filmed, but we constructed the entire basement of this house so that it could hold a horse. We were part of this project literally from the beginning. It was an amazing opportunity. We consulted on the construction site at the end of the movie. The permits that you see, if you freeze the frame when they're showing the demolition of the site, those permits are for 5050 Baltimore Avenue, which is a SPAC Group property. This is an opportunity. Real estate gives you opportunities outside of financial freedom that you never had an idea of. I never in a million years believed it would do that. I never believed that I'd have the opportunity to work for my community and run a nonprofit program called Project Rehab and take properties that look like this and help neighbors make it look like that. And that to me is part of the cherry on the top of all the benefits of real estate. Now, what's the real benefit? The real benefit is the financial benefits, the be your own boss, the opportunity to put a roof over somebody's head and assist them in making a living, making a home. I cannot tell you in the building that I'm sitting in now, how many times somebody has come and rented from us and either gotten married in this one building or had a baby in this building. I would say, excuse me, my eye keeps tearing. I would say that that's happened probably 6 times. This building is 5 years old. And to me, that's amazing that this building has had such a special place in so many people's lives. But it all started with this building, 501 South 52nd Street in West Philadelphia. We found this building on a Craigslist ad through a wholesaler. This property was a disaster, an absolute disaster. We bought it for way too much money when we bought it back in 2013 for $210,000. It had fire damage, water damage. It was a mess. An absolute disaster. It is what I call my bachelor's degree in real estate investment and construction. So as you can see, this is part of the repairs that we started to make in order to keep the building standing. This property, in addition to the fire and water damage, this property decided that its rear wall, which was 3 brick widths thick, so it's 3 rows of bricks, that's how thick the rear wall was, that the first outside width and the second middle width would separate from the building by 4 inches at the fourth and third floors. And so, these were all things that we had never, ever dealt with before as a company, both on the construction side and the development side. From the budget side, we had no idea what it was going to take. But more importantly, for 52nd Street, there was a massive perception issue that 52nd Street wasn't valuable, that it wasn't safe, that it wasn't interesting. And every time that we went to go get this beautiful property appraised, it kept coming back $200,000 to $250,000 lower than its exact replicas 4 blocks to the east, so within a half a mile. And we kept having challenges, and I'll tell you exactly how we figured out how to solve those challenges. But after the building was finished, this is what it looked like inside. So we took it from this to that. The building won 3 city awards for historic preservation, which we were really, really, really proud of and kind of did not anticipate. But to solve for the problems of the perception of value, we ended up having to buy the other corners. And so what was never our plan to get into mixed use development became essential for us to survive as a company. My business partner and we put our own personal money into the project beyond the investor's money in order to get the project operational. We needed to refinance in order to take those monies and keep moving.
And Ryan, if I could just interrupt you.
Yeah.
So how many, if you could put a number on it, how many residential projects have you completed before taking on that first mixed use one?
I'm gonna say 8 or 9.
Okay.
But not a lot.
Yeah, right. And
we got to jump head first into this thing.
Yeah, sure. And when you went into it, were you expecting, okay, after this, we're moving all forward with mixed use development or moving up to commercial, or did you just kind of take it on because it was a cool project you felt passionate about?
We had at the same time bought a lot on Baltimore Avenue that I think that my ambitions and my eyes were bigger than our wallets or our experience.
Sure.
When I saw this building for the first time, I was with my wife, and we walked out of this property, and my wife turned to me and said, "If you don't buy this building, you're an idiot."
There you go.
And I said, it's a mess. Like, it's beyond my scope. I don't know what to do with this property. And to be honest with you, I had no connections to any commercial tenants or commercial real estate brokers. So leasing the commercial space was a massive fear of mine.
Right.
It had asbestos throughout the entire first floor of the building, which I knew was going to be a total mess for us. Mm-hmm. And so, I had massive concerns about this project, but my wife literally said, "If you don't buy this, you're an idiot."
Yeah.
And she was right, by the way. Here we are, 7, 8 years later, and she was 1,000% correct.
Right. And one more question, and I'll let you move on. But
go ahead.
So those concerns that you had, those complexities, were they mainly stemming from the commercial aspect of the property? Because you had dealt with rehabs before, and I'm sure you had some idea of what could be behind the walls and the problems, like structurally.
No,
you didn't.
Far worse than anything we had faced. The fire damage was not something that we knew about. They had cosmetically repaired the fire damage and basically slapped sheetrock over the fire damaged sections of the building. Right. We knew about the water damage, which we were ready to undertake. The asbestos in the first floor ended up being tens of thousands of dollars more than we anticipated it being. The leasing of the commercial space ended up being one of the primary things that I talk about when I'm teaching a Jumpstart class, which is know your community, get involved in your community. We got involved in a couple of community meetings along the 52nd Street corridor and ended up meeting somebody who was friendly with an executive director of a nonprofit who had just lost their office space. And so Through other connections that we had, we got connected with the Commerce Department, and we partnered with the Commerce Department and this nonprofit to build this office space for them. That doesn't happen without being out there, putting your time in, having boots on the ground. And so a lot of the fears that I had came true. I would like to think that, my company's superpower is resilience. Which I guess every entrepreneur needs. And so, we figured out how to get it done. And if it meant that the project got delayed 4 months because we didn't have enough money to do it, then so be it. This project took what should have taken 15 to 18 months, ended up taking almost 2 years plus.
And it sounds like it wasn't just because it was zoned mixed use or anything, and had a different zoning classification than what you're used to. It's the sum of its parts. It's bigger.
It was bigger, more complicated, more messed up structurally. All the way around, it was a challenge. Getting a steel contractor and an iron worker to come and rebuild the fire escape. Saving the fire escape was a massive conversation because this building wasn't historically designated. So we didn't technically need to do that. But I felt that it was incredibly important to the building. That fire escape had been there for 100 years. Putting back the storefront and putting it back the way that the building was originally built was important to us, right? Instead of enclosing the corner, having that kind of alcove space. That was all really very specific in the way we were thinking about putting this building back together. It was a massive learning curve. And then getting the appraisals back, we had this building appraised 3 times. And even though we were getting rents from, 3 blocks away, where values were stronger, we weren't getting our values. So that was a massive lesson for us in this concept of perception. And so we started to change that by buying the corner directly across the street. And this came from another thing I talk about in my Jumpstart class is know your realtors, have your realtors know you. Don't get locked into one realtor. And when they know what you're looking for, they can plug and play. And know your community, right? And so for this particular building, this was in a pre-foreclosure. It had been under agreement 3 separate times. We didn't even know it was on the market. And the realtor who ended up getting it happened to be someone that we were somewhat friendly with. They reached out, and it turned out that it wasn't about the price that was important. It was about the mural that was critical to these owners. And so we went about ensuring that the mural was part of the agreement of sale, that its salvation was a part of the agreement of sale. And we came to a conclusion with the owners that, listen, the mural has an amazing message, but it's dull, it's flaking, it's starting to fall apart. Let's revamp it and let's make it a community piece. And so we brought Mural Arts in, we partnered with them, we financially paid for the mural, and then we turned around and cut the face off of the building. And the reason we did that was because we had recognized in some minor demo that we had done that there was no foundation under the front of the property. So this section of the building right here that you can see, which was the entrance to the daycare, it was sitting on just bricks. And so we wanted to build a 3rd story on the building. And to do so, we needed a sharp foundation. So we literally tore the front of the property off. But in doing so, we actually salvaged the mural. And when we put the new mural up, we did so on top of the old mural. And so you can see the project that we did. You can see how the new mural turned out. This is what the units look like inside. Now, this building has been an absolute nightmare in renting the commercial space. And this was a hard lesson learned in the lease, the commercial lease, and the attorney that we utilized to write that lease put us in a really, really bad spot. We have been working with the tenant that's in that space for the last 4 years for him to open. So there's been a push and pull significantly. Problems long before COVID ever started. But he is now, my company has taken over construction, and we're 3 weeks away from being finished the space. So it's be a 4-year venture that will almost be over. This is the other corner, basically right up the street. And this goes again to your relationships, right? We had a neighbor who owned these 3 properties who had spoken to another neighbor about their desire to sell at least one of them. And that neighbor recommended that they talk to us. And he walked over and handed my foreman an envelope with his phone number in it and the address of the property and nothing else. And after several lunches and a couple of coffee meetings, we ended up buying all 3 of these properties. They were supposed to be cosmetic renovations. That was not the case when the building in the middle collapsed and took a portion of the corner building with it.
And that happened after you had ownership or prior?
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
After we had ownership and after we had renovated the middle property, the one all the way to the left, into a triplex. And our bank did not like the fact that the scope of work had changed so significantly after the collapse. And so they filed foreclosure on a covenant default. So it means that you've paid them everything you're supposed to pay them, but you have defaulted on the scope of what you're supposed to do. And so not only were we fighting how do we make this project now work, but now we had to go find another bank, all while there was this kind of guillotine hanging over our necks. And so this was an incredibly this was the worst financial project we have ever done. I will say that 6 months ago we sold it, and we sold it for profit. So we ended up making out just fine. But as you can see, this project was massive, massive undertaking for our little company. And we ripped its guts out and we poured a new foundation in the rear, and we literally started over. And what was supposed to be 5 apartments and 2 small commercial spaces ended up being 8 apartments and 1 large commercial space. This is what it looks like today. And this is what it looks like inside. You can kind of see where we salvaged stuff and where we kind of created new. I will tell you that by the time we were done this project, we were able to go to Capital One, National Bank, and refinance that first project that we were never able to get value on because we had created the perception of value where none had existed before. In doing these 3 projects at this intersection of 52nd and Larchwood, we took 5 vacant properties and we turned them into 8, 11. We turned them into 17 residential units and 3 commercial spaces over the course of about 4 years.
Wow.
But we have started to venture into mixed-use projects all over the place. This is Pentridge Gardens. We purchased this land about 4 months before the title companies in Philadelphia stopped giving you title insurance on sheriff sale tax sales. So we were very, very lucky in our timing. But we ended up developing we had so much value in the land that we were able to utilize that value to create equity. And in doing so, we were able to basically build our office space basically at cost. This project is 14 residential units. Our office is on this level and the basement level. I'm actually sitting right here as we speak. And this was the first foray into new construction. We had never done new construction before as a company and decided that if we were going to go big. And so we built a 15,000 square foot mixed use building with a green roof. This was my master's degree in development. It was a very interesting project for us. It went very, very well, much better than some of the projects I'm about to talk about. This is what it looks like inside. And then we started to undertake, and I had mentioned before that we had bought a parcel on Baltimore Avenue around the same time that we bought that first building on 52nd Street. We bought this parcel, again, off of a wholesaler. And we had creatively connected to these two parcels. This, we reached out to the owner, and after a year and a half of conversation, we bought it from them. This last property we bought through conservatorship, which is a legal method whereby you can ask the court for the ability to rectify an issue with a property adjacent to yours. In this particular case, there was no owner. It was a defunct nonprofit. And so we were able to convince the court and the Attorney General's office in Pennsylvania that we were the best buyers. And so the court allowed us to buy it basically from ourselves as a conservator. This project ended up being 14,000 square feet. I will tell you, it's 12 residential units. 3 of them are affordable apartments with 9 market rate units. These rents are actually not what we got. We actually, on the market rents, we actually got higher rents than that. On the restricted units, we kept those rents exactly where they were, even though the building took an extra year to build. There were 2 commercial spaces, both of which are rented to women-owned businesses. Both businesses are new. Both businesses are owned by women who live in this neighborhood. One is a therapy center. The other one is a Montessori school. So this is what the parcel ended up being. It had a litany of issues. So I tell you all of that, and I tell you the nasty side of this, because even with the nasty side, it still worked. We had a neighbor who had taken about 300 square feet of our land when he overbuilt his building. We had a 1,000-gallon oil tank that somebody buried under this parcel. We had this corner of the world right here was off center with the survey office running 2 blocks to our west. And because this corner was off, when we went to go consolidate the whole parcel, they could not find the proper longitude and degrees to get this line for our property. So they had to fix this problem first. Well, that took the city like almost 2 months. This project had a multitude of delays, including if you drove past this project in August of 2019, you saw the steel go up. And if you drove past it again in October of 2019, you saw the steel come down because we had an erection company who put the steel up incorrectly. Massive issues. This is what it was designed to look like. This is what it looked like when it started going up. This is the changes that we made to the facade. And this is what the building ended up looking like. This building is finished. It opened in September. It is completely leased. We are currently under construction for the Montessori school on this first floor. This was interesting. And one of the reasons this project is really interesting on Baltimore Avenue is from a commercial mixed use standpoint, is it is getting some of the highest rents in West Philadelphia on Baltimore Avenue. Part of the reason that we're able to do that is it's new construction. One of the other reasons is we're doing a majority of the build out for all the tenants. So we're handing them turnkey spaces versus what's called a white box when you have the essentials in the building and you basically have put the drywall in and you have spackled and sanded it and done nothing else. And so we're able to drive the rents in the neighborhood from a commercial space, which helped us self-subsidize some of the affordable units in this project. This building received no public money, which is kind of our thing now, this inclusionary housing concept. This is what the units look like inside. And so we took that model of Baltimore Avenue and we decided we were going to expand upon it. This particular parcel we bought off of Comcast. Comcast was the owner. They inherited it when they bought subdivisions of Turner Broadcasting. And so we purchased this from them almost 2 years ago. We subdivided the parcel and then designed a new building. This is the current conditions, or was the current conditions. We're under construction on building 1. You can see that building 2 is a whole lot smaller. And so this is kind of our thought process with this project. Was we have a very, very sad looking corner. Doesn't have a lot of energy to it. It's not very interesting. It's not very bright. Across the street from this is an auto garage. On the other side of it is a vacant lot that's used to park cars that are under renovation. And so at the end of the day, we wanted to create this enlivened space that created walkability. And so we built the first building to be very bright and fun, and you'll see that in a second. The second building is also bright and fun, but it is an ode to the 2-story row houses that are adjacent. So it's the same color brick facade. We also built it a whole lot smaller so that it did not cast a shadow on the adjacent properties. This is what building 1 will look like. It is currently under construction. If you drive by this site, 5300 Whitby Avenue, in sometime in the next 48 hours, you're going to see a very large crane show up on the site. Our steel starts, technically it started last week for prep, but technically starts tomorrow is when steel will arrive on site. And our elevator tower is up to the 3rd floor, which is kind of awesome. This is a photo from October of the footprint of building 1. Building 2 will go here. There are 3 commercial spaces in this building. The first commercial space is this corner right here. The entrance to the building is actually here. There's another commercial space here, and then a 3rd here. The 3rd space is actually a bi-level space, goes into the basement. It is going to be a commissary bakery. It's going to be the headquarters for Tiffany's Bakery. If you've ever had their cakes or cupcakes from downtown, this is where everything is going to be made soon. I would say sometime in the next year or so, it's going to smell just unbelievable on this block. And then there's a 4th commercial space in this second building, and the residential space is in between the end of this building and the other commercial space. And the entire methodology here is that everything flows. It's all walkable. In order to get to your home in this building, you have to see this commercial space every day. You have to walk past this commercial space every day. At some point, you're going to interact with them. This is what the space looks like from a drone. Kind of cool. You can see this lower level here is where the commissary bakery is going to be. So to give you some idea, the foundation is 17 feet below grade. So it's a very, very, very deep building. This is what the second building is going to look like. And these are some of the highlights. The first building is about 40,000 square feet. It has a 6,000 square foot green roof. I think all told, the commercial space is about 6,000 square feet of this space. The rest is all residential. It'll have a fitness center, dog park, indoor bike parking, coffee center, mail storage room. The most expensive apartment in this building is going to be around $1,600 to $1,650, but there are deed restricted affordable units for the next 50 years in this project. And so, we're also in the midst of doing a mural with this building on the PennDOT bridge that leads to this project. So there's a lot of community engagement around our buildings. And so those are some of the projects that we've worked on that are mixed use in nature. And so this is my contact information again. I am absolutely happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. That was awesome to see. I appreciate you putting them together. And that's cool. We haven't really, one of the things we had lacked in the past couple of weeks is looking at like actual progress or projects and seeing like the proof in the pudding of what we're talking about being completed. And we saw several examples of that. So that's great way to wrap up the commercial discussion. There are some questions that people have been typing in, but I was taking notes as you were going through. So I'll start with those and give others a chance to submit their questions using the Q&A tab, and we'll get to them in a minute.
Cool.
So the first thing I wanted to ask you about, and what I was curious your take on it is commercial leasing and sort of what people should be prepared for, when they make that switch from residential to commercial or mixed use development. What are commercial tenants like? What are some of those, shocks that you're going to encounter when you first draft up a commercial lease? I'm just thinking in that first mixed use project that you did, I think you said you had trouble renting out to that first commercial tenant, and what was the reason for that?
So the first commercial tenant we didn't have any trouble with. It was the second and the third that we had challenges with. The first commercial tenant we didn't have any trouble with because we had a 20-year-old nonprofit who needed a space, and we had the partners to help provide that space. But more importantly, we controlled the entire construction renovation process.
Right.
And that was wonderful. One of the things, that nuances that was different for us was how commercial space is priced out. It's priced out per square foot on an annual basis. What it means to be triple net, and what's inclusive of triple net. And triple net is when the commercial tenants are paying for a portion of the operation of the building. And in some cases, you have additional charges called CAM, common area maintenance charges, which are separate from your triple net charges. And so all of those little nuances took a great deal of time to figure out. But it was the build out of the space that was the nuance that really did us in. And for us, it was about putting the proper time limit on a potential tenant to build out their space and how much free time they were going to have. What would happen in a scenario where they didn't actually build out their space or open, when their rent was going to be due, even if they hadn't opened. And so those type of things became the real challenge for us. And for the one space on 52nd Street that is just opening after all of these years, the language in the commercial lease allowed for this person not to pay rent until he opened his doors.
Okay.
So that attorney lost their job with us. We will never use them again or recommend them. But the reality of the situation is that put us in a real bind because we had no leverage for this person to actually do their job.
Yes. It sounds like there's a lot more customization with the leases where as a residential lease, it's like you pay your rent to live in this unit for.
Yeah. So not only is there a lot of customization to the lease itself, but there's a lot of customization to the build out of the space, right? And that becomes challenging, especially if you're doing a restaurant. And so, depends on who you are doing, how you're going to work with that particular owner. The reality is what we've come to find is these owners are partners in some respects. And if they are not, then we're not leasing them the space. We also are way more critical of the financials of an owner of a commercial space than we are of residential, way more critical. I want to see, your personal financial statement, and I want you to support it with documents showing what assets you have. I know that there are some companies that build out the space in its entirety and then go find a commercial tenant. That's not necessarily our way of doing it. And it also depends on the budget of the project. So those are the kind of nuances that we've overcome now. Baltimore was not as hard to lease or get operational as 500 South 52nd Street.
And how about leasing to the residential tenants of those mixed use properties? Is there any differences there? I mean, like, do people generally, have any specific, needs or dislikes about living with a commercial tenant, or no?
We haven't found any nuances related to that. We've had questions about trash pickup and things along those lines, but we haven't really had any concerns about living over a commercial space. We're also really particular. We're not going to rent to an event space. If there's somebody living above it, there's a bar that's going to be open till 2:00, is going to have a very, very different setup than, a Montessori school. I will tell you this, in the restaurants that we have built out, we've been very, very, very particular, and built into our leases is soundproofing methodologies for their hoods because of vibration from the hood to the tenant living above that hood. So certain things we've gotten really keen on, and we've forced the commercial tenants to actually do.
Okay. Great. So I'm going to move on to the audience questions here because we
Yeah,
have
sure.
people submitted. Our first one looks to come from Jero, and he's wondering earlier when you were discussing how the one project had you had comps from 3 blocks over that were supporting your sales price, but you still weren't able to convince people that that's what or convince the appraisers that that's what the actual value was. Why was that? I mean, obviously, neighborhood boundaries are something to be discussed in a larger uh,
Yeah.
conversation. But specifically for that, why weren't you seeing the appraisers realizing that or accepting that?
Well, let's have a real conversation about that then. 52nd Street is a primarily African American corridor.
Mhm.
I shouldn't even call it African American corridor because it has a significant African-based immigrant business center to it. So it was a predominantly Black corridor. There wasn't a lot of new development happening, and you had a bunch of white, middle-aged suburban appraisers coming into 52nd Street, not understanding what this project was. So it looked like an anomaly. It
Mhm.
looked like we had leased up the space, and that the ability to keep those rents where they were over time was not in existence. And that if we sold this to someone else, the value would not be there from a sales standpoint, regardless of the rents that we made. So they would cut our cap rate by a point, or they would, I mean, we had one appraiser. He, even though we had a lease for 8 years with this 20-year-old nonprofit for $15 a square foot, he undercut our commercial rent to $8 a square foot because he felt that it was an anomaly for us and that the reality was $8. And so, in order for that to change, we needed other dumpsters to be shown. We needed other cranes in the air. We needed there to be some semblance that there was support for this. And that 3 blocks away in the residential neighborhood of Cedar Park in West Philly was irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. And how about, what is the environment like now? If somebody were maybe 2 blocks over, are appraisers looking at it the same way, or are they?
Well, so the upside to getting in early is the prices are great. The downside to renovating your projects is the prices become ungreat.
Mhm.
Things are very expensive on 52nd Street now related to their size and scope. And what you've seen is residential sales have crossed over into onto and beyond 52nd Street. So, when we did 500 South 52nd Street as the first building, a row home on Larchwood Avenue on the 52nd block was, in the low ones if it was renovated. Today, that's a $300,000 house.
Right.
And part of that is demand. Part of that is, price point and interest rates. But a lot of that has to do with that intersection is now complete.
Yeah.
Has this perception differently than it did 10 years ago.
Right. And what I keep thinking back to is what you said is that was 4 vacant properties that now has what, 18 some units?
Yeah, exactly. So there's more eyes on and ears. It's a very different space than it was before.
Yeah. So great. The next question it comes from Teddy, and she was just wondering where in Philly is Pentridge Gardens?
Pentridge Gardens is on the 5,000 block of Pentridge Street in West Philadelphia in a neighborhood called Cedar Park. It's a block south of 50th in Baltimore.
Okay. Next one comes from Reginald, and he was wondering, how did you handle the neighbor who overbuilt onto your land? So I think this was on Baltimore Ave.
Great question. So what are your options, right? Your options are sue the neighbor and get jammed up in court. And the only person who's going to make any money are the attorneys. And you're going to win, but what are you really going to win, right? The other piece was from a PR standpoint, the gentleman is beloved by this community. And so as a small businesses in this community, as a community neighbor, as someone who lives in this neighborhood, when you look at all of those scenarios and you do the PR math, suing this guy is not a good idea. And so the best way to have handled it was to handle it like he was my brother, right? What would I do in this scenario if this was my brother? And that was cut off the section that he needed, take back some of what he didn't need, give him the sections that we were cutting off for him for $1, have him pay for half the survey costs, and trade him for support of all the zoning variances we needed.
Mhm.
And that was how we cut that deal.
Some nitty-gritty bargaining there. That's laying your cards out on the table and seeing what the best way to take
Yeah,
care.
so we transferred about 190 square feet of the 300 square feet we transferred over to him for $1.
Right.
And I think $1,200 is what he put into the survey costs.
Next question comes from Teddy, and they were wondering, Ryan, was there an event or activity that caused that group to connect with the community for the very excellent real estate development? So it sounds like you got good reviews from
Thanks,
Teddy.
Eddie.
He's wondering if you think there's one, specific.
Yeah, I can tell you what the event is. I moved into this neighborhood before I became a real estate developer.
There you go.
I was the first white family to move back on my block in 50 years.
Wow.
My neighbor was the second black family to have moved on that block 52 years prior. She and I became friends, and I became friends with the block captain, and I met the ward leader who was also a block captain, and we were doing all this development. We renovated a single family house on the 5100 block of Hazel before that was the thing to do. We, did one at 48th and King Sessing. And it just became very apparent to us that we were the gentrifier, and we weren't having a conversation about what we were doing and what the neighborhood actually wanted, and if the neighborhood was comfortable with us renovating these vacant properties. And so we just started really having conversations with the neighbors. When Baltimore Avenue happened, we realized very quickly that Baltimore Avenue was going to be complicated and it needed zoning variances. And simultaneously, there was a nonprofit in our neighborhood who was applauded for building a 20-unit apartment building for $7 million of taxpayer money.
Mhm.
That really pissed me off, like immensely pissed me off, that they were applauded for spending so much money to build so little. And so I started looking at our projects and saying, like, where's the pressure point of construction costs versus market rents versus density? And like, can we self-subsidize some of these units? And so that was the moment when I realized what the math would look like and that we needed these variances. And so we started having conversations around where are their number one issues? Can we bridge the gap between the asshole developer in the room and the angry neighbor? And that's exactly what happened. We needed 7 zoning variances for Baltimore Avenue. And when we had our community meeting, we had a 51-9 vote in favor. And so, our attitude about every project after this is just like that. So Wade Flats, for example, is a by right project, but every month, every first Monday of every month, there is a community meeting where you can log into Zoom. I mean, this month's meeting is in person. And you can join us, have a conversation about project, get aerial shots, get an update on the CPM schedule, the critical path method schedule for our contractors, what's coming, what problems we've had, and then we get feedback. So like if you drive past our site and you see construction signs about a block away that there's a construction project coming up, that was because a neighbor asked for that. Mm-hmm. So like, our attitude about this is you're just being a good neighbor. You're just not being a jerk.
Yeah, that's a great attitude to have about it. The next question comes from Norman, and before I move on, I just want to apologize if I skip over some questions here. There's so many. Clearly, Ryan, you're a wealth of knowledge, but
my pleasure.
We only have about 5 to 10 minutes left, so I'm going to try and pick some of the key ones I'm seeing here. The first one comes from Norman, and back to what we were talking about, leases. He's wondering how the pandemic changed the commercial rental business. Not at all, it sounds like. No?
Not for us. No, the nonprofit has reopened. They're mostly office space and community event space for their programming. They've reopened and actually look to renew their lease. The therapy office expanded. They were in one of our buildings before. Now they're triple the size. Yeah, no, we have not. The pandemic showed some holes in systems that my company had, but overall showed the strength of the relationships that we had with our tenants. We were not impacted greatly by COVID the way some others were.
Next question comes from Shrey, and she says, "First, thank you, Ryan. And also, how was the financials underwriting of the Wade Flats project evolved with the recent increase in lumber and construction costs? How did you navigate these cost increases with lenders and investors?"
So investors and lenders don't give a shit. Just have a real conversation about it. I mean, my investors care, but they don't really care. You don't really want to go back to your investors and ask for more money because it changes the capital stack. And as a developer, it puts you further behind the ability to actually, have a real payday. We went back to the drawing board with our project. We deconstructed our project and pulled out every nuance that we no longer needed. When the pandemic and the price increases first happened back in April, we were down to only $40,000 of a $325,000 contingency. We were basically in my opinion, we were not in a good position, and we were not yet finished our foundation. That is a bad place to be. By the time we were done filing amended permits for this project, we had spent somewhere around $25,000 in architectural fees and other fees to get to savings, but we had put another $220,000 back into our contingency. And that is how we dealt with that nonsense.
Okay. Next question here comes from Bruce, and he's wondering, what are the most important factors in getting the bank to approve financing for the next mixed-use project? So maybe comparing them to like a residential, when you're going to a lender with a residential project, you're obviously showing them rental comps or sales comps in the area. What are banks looking at for mixed-use projects?
That's a great question. I mean, the math still plays out the same way. You still need the same debt service coverage ratio or something similar. They still want the loan to value or the loan to cost to be, in a similar percentage. The reality of the situation is they're going to look at rental comps. They want to know your marketing plan for the space. That has always been very helpful for us. And if you can have a tenant lined up, you just won the lottery.
Yeah. And by that marketing plan, you mean like the package of the whole?
Yeah. How are you going to market the commercial space? Who are you marketing to? Who's your user? Why?
Right.
One of the things we ask for when we're looking at commercial tenants is, do you have a business plan? And what I'm looking for in the business plan is not like the greatest business plan ever written. I want to know that the person running this business knows their segment, right? Understands their marketplace. If it's a restaurant, I want to see their menu and their menu pricing. I want to know that they know what they're getting into, because if they are unsuccessful, we are unsuccessful.
Okay. Next question comes from Keith, and he was wondering, can you talk about how your company grew from the first small project? How many full-time employees do you have now, and how did that progress go from the beginning? What's your experience with using consultants or subcontractors as opposed to FTEs?
Full-time employees. So we have 12 employees now. There are two owners and 10 people. I would say 1, 2, 3, 4 of those 10 are in the office. One of them is a construction foreman. The rest are all in maintenance staff. How do we grow so fast? I'm glad you think it's fast. 10 years to me seems like a hell of a slow pace. The only thing I can tell you is resilience. Every time a project smacked us in the head, every time that I sat at my kitchen table on a Saturday night at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking to myself, this thing is over, I woke up on Monday morning and figured out how to make it work. In some cases, that meant selling off properties that I didn't want to sell out of the portfolio just to make the math work. Sometimes it meant not taking a paycheck for a quarter. or distribution so that I could afford my employees. I don't like subcontractors very much, mostly because you can't get them to buy into your mission and your overall goal as well as you can an employee who believes in the mission and the goal. More than half of the staff that we've had have been with the company for 5 or more years. So, these folks have helped us grow. They've gone from, I have one person, our construction foreman, who's gone from, starting at $18 an hour, who is now, full-time benefits and is making 80+ thousand a year, plus bonuses. And my guess is a year from now, that will not be his salary. It will be more than that. And the reality is he earned every bit of that because he helped the company grow. And so I will take that over a subcontractor any day, all day.
Sure. Great. Well, there's a couple questions left, but we're going to move on and wrap up tonight just because I want to stick to our timeline here. But Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. That was an excellent hour of content, and I'm excited to editing.
And I see Bruce is on here.
I was gonna yeah,
that's my guy right there.
Yeah, so
I will tell you, I'm going to leave you with one piece of advice. With subcontractors, right? The key is not whether they screw up or whether something goes wrong, even when it's not their fault. It's what they do after the fact. And I commend Bruce because we ran into a structural engineer who's been an absolute pain in the ass, along with a concrete distributor that basically put him in a bad spot. And that man stuck through it. I recommend him as a masonry contractor all day, every day because of it.
There you go. All right.
That is your lesson regarding subcontractors.
Bruce, I think you better post your information in the Jumpstart Facebook group because you're going to have some.
Go ahead, man.
Clients here.
Just finish our tower first.
There you go. Well, on top of Bruce, there's several others in the Q&A who are thanking you for your time, and thanking you for your honesty related to the racial quality issues in 52nd Street. Obviously, we appreciate you having a real discussion about that.
And Derek, if anybody desires, it doesn't look like I can put my information. No, I guess I can put it in the chat.
Yeah, you can put it in the chat. It was also in the on the slides. So
okay. Yep.
But also, I usually send out a follow-up email. So I'll pass it on to everybody tomorrow in the morning.
Yeah, great.
But yeah, let me just wrap up here by saying what we have coming up next week. Or sorry, not next week, but 2 weeks from now on December 13th, we're going to be talking about depreciation with a returning guest, Jack McGovern, who covered tax issues for commercial real estate. And now we're going to be talking about how those how the depreciation of your properties, can play into your tax payments or tax debt. And then I guess we don't have any JUMPinars until the new year. On January 3rd, we're speaking with Joseph Scorsese about his company Lending One. And then the following week is going to be with Mindy Maislin and Tim Eiffel from I forget what their company is called, but they are an advocate for street trees. And we're going to be talking about how they have an input or an impact on corridors. And just a heads up for anybody who regularly attends every week, we're probably going to switch to doing every other week JUMPinars in the new year. We've covered 70 plus topics now, and sometimes have trouble getting guests and keeping it lively. So I appreciate everybody joining for the past year every week, but we're going to be probably moving towards a bi-weekly schedule in a little bit. And you can register and check out all those upcoming events at jumpstartgermantown.com and click on the events page. Tonight's discussion will be available as a podcast. If you just search Jumpstart Philly Radio on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or anywhere you can find podcasts. It'll probably be posted by Wednesday. Otherwise, you can check out all the past episodes. Like I said, the over 70 that we've done so far. And lastly, this will be available as a Zoom recording as well, also on our website at jumpstartgermantown.com/JUMPinars. And that does it. So thanks again, Ryan. Really appreciate your time tonight.
Welcome.
Hope everybody has a good rest of your Monday evening. All right. See you later.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.